We are adding the finishing touches to our modular city with some essential scattered terrain. Pieces that bring life and add storytelling to your tabletop. We're talking about gallows, wells, bulletin boards, planters, and even a shrine. These are the details that make a city feel alive. I will walk you through every step and every trick, so you can build them too, meaning that by the end of this video you will be able to craft a variety of city elements for your tabletop.
Welcome back to HANDCRAFTED. Today we're wrapping up our modular city series, at least for now, with a set of scattered terrain to bring more life and detail to our streets. We've built houses, docks, city tiles, but a city needs more than just buildings. So in this episode we're making gallows, a well, a bulletin board, latrines, large flower pots, and even a small shrine-like house with a statue. These are the kind of details that will fill your tabletop with storytelling potential, and I will walk you through the process step by step. This is the final city terrain built for now, except for one special video where I will showcase everything we've built so far. Now, get your tools ready, because we're starting!
Let's make a crucial piece for a medieval fantasy city, and an even more iconic one if you play Mordheim: gallows. I started by cutting several foam strips about 1 cm wide and then texturing them with an aluminium wire brush. Next, I cut several pieces and created 2 rectangles of the same size. Mine are 12 by 8 cm. After marking evenly spaced points with a marker, I glued smaller foam pieces onto them using hot glue. Once dry, we will add a glue drop to each support and carefully attach the other rectangle, closing the structure. Take your time to align everything properly, but don't take too long because the glue cools quickly. If that's too stressful, you can always use PVA glue and secure the structure with pins. But I was too immersed in the project to wait and just wanted to keep going. To reinforce the structure, I added some pins, cut with cutting pliers, and embedded them into the foam using a hobby file. You may have seen me do this technique in the city market video. If not, check it out later, but finish this one video first. Now onto the platform. After shaping some coffee stirrers, I glued them onto the foam structure with hot glue to create the wooden platform. If they don't fit perfectly, just trim one slightly thinner and you're good to go. After gluing all the planks, we trim the excess and reinforce the underside with extra scraps. This will make the piece sturdier and add some weight. Oh, and don't forget to sand everything down a bit to avoid splinters. Perfect, let's continue. Now we will use some more foam strips to build the gallows frame, using the same techniques, hot glue and pin reinforcements. I'm also adding diagonal strips for extra detail on the platform. I eyeball the cuts and glue them with hot glue. We will also add additional reinforcement to the pillars and the horizontal beam of the gallows. If you want perfect 45-degree cuts, you can use a small meter box. You will find links to different options in the materials list, including the one I'm using. I added some more angled pieces to create a sturdier pillar base and add even more detail. This is really coming together, just a few more details. First, the trapdoors. I textured them with the brush first. Then I used a pencil to create a frame and add some extra wood grain. I glued them into the platform using PVA glue, since I was about to go to bed and didn't feel like heating up the hot glue gun, but either option works. As you can see, I used the meter box again to make some diagonal cuts. Now it's time for the ladder. We will make it using coffee stirrers again. I glued it with hot glue for speed, but then reinforced all the joints with super glue. Otherwise, it would be too fragile, and I don't want the clumsy players at my table to break anything. After waiting a few minutes, the ladder will be completely dry, and we can glue it onto the platform. Now let's make the nooses. You could do this after painting if you have a nice looking cord, but mine is too white, so I want to paint it too. We start by making a small loop and securing it with a double knot. Then we wrap the string several times around the main cord and secure it with another knot. Sorry if the process isn't too clear, I was more focused on the cord than on the camera. Cut the excess and secure everything with a few drops of superglue. This will prevent it from unraveling. For attaching the nooses, we could just tie them on, but I prefer to make a hole so the rope comes out right from the center of the crossbeam. Pass the rope through the hole, wrap it around the beam a few times, then tie a knot or secure it with superglue. I ran a bit short of cord, so I went with the second option. Repeat the process for the second noose and we're almost there! Last step, the trapdoor mechanism. Using a small textured foam piece, I will cut out a semicircle. I lower the proxen's temperature and proceed with the cut. For the lever, I will use a toothpick with small notches on one end instead of points on both sides. Make a small hole, apply a drop of PVA glue and insert it. Finally, with a pencil, I will create an indentation to simulate the lever's movement range. Now all that's left is to glue the mechanism in place and let it dry. Then we can start priming. Let's see if you can guess what we are making with this piece of cardboard tube I just cut. A well. To do this, we will texture some foam strips to resemble masonry. Using a hot glue gun, we will attach one strip inside and one outside the cardboard tube. This way, we will have texture on both sides and a nice thickness. Next, we will glue a couple of textured pillars to resemble wood. We will place a crossbeam and use the pin technique again to reinforce the structure. After scrunching some foam tiles for extra texture, we will start gluing them onto the top of the well, cutting them at slight angles so they fit together neatly. Now we will use a cardstock piece as a base. Just glue it down with hot glue and it's done. Just like we did for the gallows, we will cut some foam strips at a 45-degree angle and attach them to connect the pillars and the crossbeam. Next, we will drill holes in the pillars. First with a pin, then widening them with a toothpick. This will allow us to pass a small round wood dowel through, which we will use to hold the rope. Using super glue, we will attach a small piece of string and let it dry. Then we will wrap it around the dowel and seal it with more super glue. To fix the wood dowel in place, we will glue it on both sides with PVA glue. Finally, we will attach the lower end of the rope with PVA glue, and please cut it first and then glue it, unlike me who always makes things harder for no reason.
If you're enjoying this build, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We are not stopping here. More awesome builds are coming, and your support helps keep these projects going. Also, a few days ago, it made 1 year since my first video. And I want to thank you all of you guys for the support and love you gave me. Now, let's get crafting!
Alright, this piece is heavily inspired by Mordheim and 40k. We will start with a small foam piece, which we will texture using a roller, or a ballpoint pen if you don't have one. Next, we cut a piece of chipboard into a classic house shape, making sure it matches the size of our foam base. On one of the facades, we will draw an arch using anything round we have on hand. Then we cut it out with a knife or a modeling blade. Now let's glue everything together using hot glue, making sure everything is well aligned. Take your time and make sure to cover any gaps. If you have trouble, you can wait a bit more than me for the glue to cool, before you start gluing the next piece. I'm always talking about patience, but sometimes I don't have enough. Great, now I'm going to paint the piece black. I do this because accessing the interior will be harder later. I also painted a bit on the outside to help reinforce the structure. Using a baton, I added texture to a thin foam sheet, which I later cut with scissors. We will glue it into the interior along with a couple of toothpicks. In my case, I used leftover incense sticks, which are slightly thinner. Cut the excess and let it dry. Next, we apply a neutral gray overbrush to the entire interior. I then use gold for the details. I had an old Minas Tirith warrior from when I was a kid, so I gave it a couple of coats of copper to make it look like a statue. While that was drying, I used filler to texture the exterior walls. I spread it with my fingers, tapping to create an interesting texture. Once everything was dry, I removed the miniature from its base. I carved a small notch where I wanted to place it and glue it with PVA glue. I painted a couple of cardstock pieces using black. I used a permanent marker instead of paint since I didn't want to wait for it to dry, and it wouldn't be visible anyway. Then I glued them together with hot glue to form the roof base. For the shingles, I used leftover strips from the previous City Houses project, which by the way, you can check it out here. I built the roof by layering the strips and trimming them with scissors as needed. To refine the look, I added a decorative trim made from coffee stirrers. Also did exactly the same for the back facade. Then I placed a small crossbeam made from a textured foam strip. To decorate that crossbeam, I used tiny metallic cones, which are usually meant for nail art. They were tricky to manipulate, but I eventually managed to glue them in place with a bit of PVA glue. For the front facade, I used a toy piece I had saved. This was actually a leftover part from the ship's shield I made last year. I will leave the video here if you want to check it out. It's a simple but great looking build. I primed this piece with a bit of spray paint to help with the adhesion. Then I glued it in place with hot glue, and now all that's left is painting. Now let's make some latrines. First, we will cut a foam piece, but one of the narrow sides will have an angled cut. Next, we will patiently cover all 4 sides with coffee stirrers. I place 2 or 3 at a time, cut the excess and repeat until it's fully covered. With a bit of patience, you will have it done in no time. Once that's finished, sand everything well to make sure there are no splinters. To add detail and improve the look, we will place more stirrers horizontally at the top, hiding any imperfections. All the cuts are eyeballed. This piece is really simple, and if it's not perfect, it will just have more personality. I doubt anyone will have taken the time to carefully construct a filthy latrine. Next, I made a small door using foam and thinner coffee stirrers for the crossbeams. We will glue it on with hot glue on the taller side of the building. And now we have to move on to the roof. I simply cover it with the same stirrers I used for the door. Trim the excess with pliers and that's it. On to the next piece. Let's do a bulletin board. I'm going for a super simple design. No mini roof or anything like that. We will start with the foam strips we've been using all along. But this time we will carve out a small section using a knife and tweezers. Next, we will fill the space with hot glue and place coffee stirrers inside. This is very similar to what we did in the market video for the weapon display stand. To reinforce the structure, we will add a super piece to the back, making it sturdier. Then we will trim the excess with cutting pliers. We will place a narrower foam strip at the bottom and another one at the top, framing the board. I think I made the pillars a bit too wide, so I used the Proxxon to trim them down a little, and I think it was the right call. Finally, I made a couple of bases with chipboard and glued them on with hot glue. After spreading a bit of PVA glue over the surface, I first added coarse sand and then fine sand to create a nice texture. We will let this dry for at least a couple of hours, and then it will be ready for painting. Alright, let's make some decorative wooden planters to add a bit more color to our streets. We will start with a small foam block. This process is very simple. I will use thin coffee stirrers to cover the sides of the piece. First, we cut a straight edge and glue it using a hot glue gun. Once we have one side fully covered, we use cutting pliers to trim the excess and repeat the process. It's important that the last coffee stirrer extends slightly above the top to achieve the proper planter look. As you can see, it's an easy task, just requires a bit of patience. I made 4 of these and I will probably keep them identical, but feel free to experiment with different shapes and variations. Once all the sides are covered, we will glue matchsticks to the corners to hide the seams and improve the overall appearance. We trim the excess with cutting pliers and that's it. Even though it won't be too visible once we add flowers and plants, I like to add some texture, so I spread a bit of PVA glue over the planter surface with an old brush. Then I sprinkle fine sand over it and remove the excess. Before painting, we should wait at least a couple of hours, though I let mine dry overnight.
With all the pieces built, it's time for painting. We will keep the color schemes consistent with the rest of the city, but I will add a few little touches to make each piece pop. And if you like to support the channel, you can check out my Patreon, where I share extra content, templates, and behind the scenes updates. Every little bit helps keep this project alive, and I truly appreciate it.
The first step will be priming everything we made with a mix of black acrylic paint and PVA glue. For me, 2 coats are optimal, then we let it dry completely. Also, again, thank you very much to all the people who's supporting me on Patreon, it means a lot to me. Since most of the crafted pieces will simulate wood, we will start with a dark base coat for all wooden surfaces. I'm trying to cover about 90% of the area, leaving some black visible in the crevices. Next, I will use a neutral grey overbrush for the stone parts, bringing out the texture we created with the roller and the sand. Try not to press too hard so the paint stays on the surface and doesn't fill the recesses. Now let's move on to the exterior walls of the little house. For this I will use fawn colored paint. This time I'm aiming for full coverage, but if few small black spots remain, there's no need to stress over it. As soon as the paint is dry, we will apply a light buttermilk dry brush. If you notice, this is the same exact color scheme I used for the houses, just like in the previous video, which you can check out here. For the roof, we will start by painting it with alizarin crimson, which is basically a deep red shade. We will also take this opportunity to apply a couple of green washes to the well, simulating moss clinging to the rock and giving the stone a damp, weathered look. Let's continue with the wood. Time for the usual intermediate step. We will do an overbrush, always perpendicular to the wood grain, using a medium brown. We will apply this to all wooden surface, as well as the gallows ropes and the well skirt. If you have any doubts about painting wood and other surface, you can check out my basic painting guide here. Great! Once everything is dry, we will move on to the highlights. For this, I will use an old makeup brush and fawn color paint. First, I remove almost all the paint from the brush using a paper towel. Then, I will do an ultralight dry brush on the edges of the pieces and in areas I want to highlight. It's important not to apply it too evenly, as this will reduce depth and the contrast between light and shadow, something crucial for a good finish. Alright, we're almost done. I decide to paint the detail on the little house in gold to make it stand out. The small spikes on the top beam were painted silver. We will leave this piece for now and come back for the final details later. For the ropes, I did a dry brush with bone white to differentiate them from the wood and make them stand out. Finally, to finish off the stone sections, we will apply a pure white dry brush. This enhances the textures and adds depth to the masonry. Let's jump over the computer for a moment. I decided to design some Mordheim style posters using Adobe Illustrator. Even though there are tons available online, many of much higher quality than mine, I wanted to create my own custom ones. Plus this way I can share the file with you so you can use it too. You will find it available on Patreon and Discord, so you know the drill. Links are in the description and the pinned comment for you to check out. Once I finished the design, I printed out a few and cut them out. To attach them, I simply applied a bit of PVA glue on the back and placed them on the bulletin board and the latrine. To make things more interesting, I tore some of them for a more worn out look. Now, to enhance the effect, we will mix some water with brown paint and more glue. We will apply this mixture over the freshly glued posters. This will give them a more realistic weather appearance while also sealing them in place. By the way, I had some brown wash left over, so I took the chance to apply it to the house walls to darken them a bit. I'm also going to do a red overbrush on the roof to add a bit more depth and visual interest. To finish off the piece, I will add a red adhesive jewel to the golden decoration I painted earlier. This will also help cover up a small hole that I couldn't quite seal properly with the hot glue. A bit of super glue for a strong bond, and now onto the final piece. We will paint the planters using the same wood color scheme, including the soil. I recorded this separately since I made these pieces quite a bit earlier than the rest, and they kind of got left into the limbo until now. Now for the fun part! I spread a layer of PVA glue over the soil to make sure the plants stick well. First, we place the larger flowers. 3 is enough in my opinion, but that's up to your personal taste. Then I add a few tufts to create some variety. Finally, I fill in the remaining gaps with a grass and flower mix I had on hand. Always do this over a piece of paper or a tray so you can collect the excess and use it for future projects. Now we let everything dry, and there's just one last step: sealing. It's not strictly necessary, but to make sure everything stays in place, I added some watered down PVA glue using a dropper. Then I sprayed some alcohol over it to reduce surface tension and help the glue soak in properly. This will need a full day to completely dry, and try not to overdo it with the glue. Now all that's left is to see all those pieces in a cool city setup.
And there we have it! scattered terrains that completes our city. These little details make the world feel lived in and are perfectly integrated with all the city builds we've done so far. If you want to run some games in this city terrain collection, check out my itch.io, where I upload free adventures and map resources to use in your game. And if you're new to the channel or missed any parts of the series, you can watch the entire Modular City playlist right here. I think the next video will take a little longer than usual since I got a lot of designing work to do and want to improve a bit some stuff. Meanwhile, we can stay in touch at Discord. See you in the next video.